Hi. Today we're going to talk about what to do when we feel overwhelmed. So, when I was married to a good man who suffered from addiction, I was terrified of leaving him. I thought about leaving him all the time. I think part of me always knew we would end up in divorce, but the idea of actually leaving paralyzed me with fear. There were times that I was so upset, I would try to will myself to leave. But for so many reasons, I was always unable to walk away from a very unhealthy relationship. I thought, am I stuck in this marriage forever? Do I really have the courage to take my kids and leave? There was a day when I made a tough decision to plan my divorce. Although I didn't have everything figured out, I believed in myself enough to take a leap of faith and to start the process. I knew that I had to trust that everything would be all right and that I'd be able to figure out the details along the way. Despite not having a complete plan, I had enough of a plan to know that leaving was my best option and that I would handle the rest as it came. I chose to trust that things would be okay if I just took the leap of faith and started planning my divorce. Again, I didn't have any and every detail mapped out, but I had enough of a plan to know that I had an option to leave and I would figure out the rest as I went along. One of the things I had to figure out was money. I was a stay-at-home mom. I had not worked for 7 years, and we were broke. So when I was preparing for the divorce, I had a therapist, and I always highly recommend a therapist. Now, I am not a trained therapist. I am just a woman who has experienced for a decade loving someone struggling with addiction and then has spent the last decade learning and studying about this situation. But what I always give you and present to you should be taken with a grain of salt. You should listen to it if you like, and then do what works best for you, or use what I'm teaching you and bring it to your therapist as a talking point. And your therapist can tell you whether these suggestions are helpful for you or not. And if you cannot afford a therapist, because a lot of people can't, or there's too long of a wait list, or you're having a hard time finding a good expert, then use these suggestions, but then ask yourself, are they working for me? Because not everything I say is going to work for everyone. Okay, so back to this, right? So I had a therapist. She was lovely. Her name was Carol. And there were many weeks where I would walk into Carol's office feeling very beaten down. And she would provide so much encouragement. That was the thing I loved about Carol. She was just constantly reminding me that I could do it, which is something I haven't heard in a really long time. So by the time that I left her office, I was ready to face the challenges waiting for me. One afternoon, I walked into Carol's office. I sat down on her couch and said, "My husband doesn't want to pay me child support or alimony." And to state the obvious, addiction needs money in order to survive. So it's going to be very greedy with finances. Carol listened without judgment because she was wonderful like that. And when I was done, she told me a story about when she got divorced, making the mistake of settling for pennies because she just wanted the divorce to be done and over with. I remember thinking, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I'll give away almost anything. Just get me out of this situation because I don't want any more conflict. I feel guilty that I'm the one choosing to leave, so I should give him everything that he asked for, right? At least this is what I told her and what I told myself. And I was convinced that she would tell me it was okay and that I was right. And because this was such a difficult, toxic time in my life, that I should take whatever he was willing to give me and run. But instead, she told me exactly what I did not want to hear. Carol told me that I deserved more and that my kids deserved more. If I settled for less, I would regret it, and that this was part of my growth. I needed to learn to ask for what I needed. And I was so scared. I went through all the reasons why she could be wrong and why my situation was very, very different from hers. But driving home from Carol's office, my husband at the time called and said, "How much support are you going to ask for? Because I'm not willing to pay you more than blank." And he stated the amount. And then he said, "And don't even think that you can get away with $1 more, because it's not happening." Now, I was still processing Carol's advice. I hadn't even gotten home yet, and I needed time to work through this and come out with a solid answer that felt right to me. Because I had one expert on one side telling me one thing, and then I had a very threatening husband telling me another. And I needed to take a moment to decide for myself, which is the exact same thing I'm encouraging you to do with me. So what do we do when we're confronted with something that makes us feel uncomfortable? What do we do when we get that phone call or get that confrontational conversation with our loved ones and we're just not ready to handle it? We need more space and time to think about it. Well, that's when we create a boundary. And that's when we create distance. Remember, we talked about boundaries a couple weeks ago. So basically, I told him that I needed some time to think about it. I heard what he was saying. This is what I said to him. I hear what you're saying. I understand where you are coming from. I do. But I'm not prepared to have this conversation yet. Now, when I was talking, I was not mocking him or being antagonistic. I was very dignified. I was very polite about it. And I also hung up the phone because I didn't have to talk about it right then and there. Why did I think that I was on his time schedule all the previous times in the past? I wasn't. And I had to create my own time schedule. I didn't have to let him boss me around or bully me or push me into making a verbal commitment that I wasn't ready to make. In fact, I didn't even need to answer the phone if I was not in the right space to talk to him. So out of habit, I think we answer phone calls immediately or respond to text messages or emails because we're trying to be polite. And we are thoughtful people. But remember, we reserve the right to take a timeout from our partners. We don't need to respond and be at their beck and call. We can give ourselves some space. So halfway home, I said to myself out loud, I just need a timeout. And I took one. It took a few weeks to figure out what I was comfortable with. So what about you? Do you need a timeout from something or someone? I would love to hear about it. If you would like a transcript of this podcast, or you would like to ask a question or offer a suggestion to another woman in this community, you all are so wise. And when you share, it is so helpful to help other women to know they are not alone and to be relatable. Community should not just be about me. I want it to be about all of us. I want to create a safe place where we all can discuss what's going on in our lives and offer suggestions to one another. Because each one of us are in a different situation, but we're all in pain and we're all feeling slightly alone. And we all deserve community and to be heard and to be seen. So if you're interested in that, you can go find me at Michelle Anderson. You can just Google it, or on Substack, Love Over Addiction. And I hope to hear from you. Take care.